and this thing, if I am anything, I am a Godzilla fan and have been since I was a child, since I was a kid. Let me show you something I got. This is a Godzilla. It's a bootleg Lego Godzilla. I don't know if you can see that, but it's like a bootleg that I got at a convention. Just a little. Can you see that? You see that there? Little bootleg Godzilla. I love Godzilla. I have loved Godzilla since I was a kid. Yesterday, November 3rd, was Godzilla Day in celebration of November 3rd, 1954, when the first Godzilla film was released. I actually quit Cub Scouts. I was in the Cub Scouts for a spell. We did all sorts of activities. I was fine with Cub Scouts. Didn't hate it, whatever. But Godzilla Week on the 4:30 movie in Detroit, Michigan was occurring at the same time as Cub Scouts. I had to drop out of Cub Scouts to see Godzilla Week. Now, what was Godzilla Week? It was every day they would play a Godzilla movie at 4:30 in the afternoon. I never missed it. And I'm love the old school Godzilla, the Toho Godzilla movies are fantastic. The American ones are kind of mixed for me, I when they redesigned Godzilla back in, what was it, like the late 90s, 2000, something like that. It was, the Roland Emmerich Godzilla. I was not a huge fan of it. Not a huge fan. And then they killed off that version of Godzilla later in another Godzilla movie. There have been Godzilla cartoons. There have been many incarnations of Godzilla. And by that, I mean, not just design of the character, but tones for the movies. The first film, 1954 Godzilla, is a straight up, absolutely horror film. I mean, it's been talked about often in all sorts of essays that this was Japan's reaction to the horrors of Hiroshima and the atomic bomb. And Godzilla, the manifestation of Godzilla came from the atomic bomb, right? That it was in the story. That's how Godzilla was manifested and created. So I've been a Godzilla fan since I was a little kid. Collected Godzilla, made an Aurora model kit of Godzilla with glow-in-the-dark hands and head. I don't know why those are the only glow-in-the-dark parts, but whatever. I painted it so the teeth and the claws would glow. Is pretty cool. But I've always loved Godzilla. I haven't rushed out to see every Godzilla movie. They're hard to find sometimes, right? But I do have this Godzilla collection. This is standard def DVD, but what it has is a lot of the classic Godzilla movies that you have, not just the English dubbed versions, but the Japanese subtitled versions in English, and you find out how different the story is. The 1954 Godzilla, which many would argue it's in black and white, many would argue it's the best one. It's two different movies. There's the Japanese version, which is deadly serious, a sort of love triangle in the midst of the destruction of Japan by this terrible lizard, Godzilla, the king of the monsters. But when it was brought to the United States, the company that was distributing it in the United States thought, well, Americans aren't going to, we have to dub this, but not only this, Americans aren't going to want to watch a movie with just Japanese people in it. We need to add something to it. And they added Raymond Burr's character, who plays a journalist, and his name is?
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin. Steve Martin is reporting from Japan on, and I didn't realize it at the time. I never noticed, right? It's like, oh, that's Godzilla. Raymond Burr's in it. He has interactions with all the other characters. I didn't realize how bad it was till later. I became a little bit more sophisticated moviegoer as I got older, and I finally saw the original Japanese version, then watched the version with Raymond Burr, the US version of Godzilla, and you can see how badly it matches. It just doesn't match very well. The footage, it's just shot with, it's all in black and white, but it's clearly different cameras, different cinematographer. Raymond Burr's always on some sort of set, and he's always has some distance when he interacts with the other Japanese characters. You can see that it's cut the best they could, but it's kind of cheesy, you know. It would be like putting me into Star Wars, you know. It would just be weird. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. But I have just loved Godzilla forever. I think, and what's interesting is that the Godzilla movies have different tones. The first Godzilla is very much a horror film. It's I would even argue it's something of an art film from that era.
Mm-hmm.
Then other Godzilla movies sort of vary in their level of seriousness. Then there are Godzilla movies for kids, you know, Son of Godzilla with Minya. Remember Minya? Does anyone remember Minya? Which was Godzilla's son. And it's sort of this fantasy where this little kid is it sort of befriends Godzilla, but it's all in his mind. So what I find interesting about Godzilla movies is you could look at them and you could say, okay, is this a comedy? Is this more of a comedy? Is this sort of a Godzilla movie for kid where Godzilla is like friend to children everywhere? Or is this a Godzilla movie like Shin Godzilla where it's an absolute terror? And Shin Godzilla I did see in the theater. It was I love it. I have both versions, the English dubbed and the subtitled version. What I like about the film is that it takes Godzilla seriously. It's like, you know, it takes it seriously in how Japan would respond, and they would respond to Godzilla like a natural disaster. So you see a lot of boring meetings kind of taking place behind the scenes, but it's all like, here's the reaction to the monster. What do we say to the public? How do we actually do this? What would kind of planning would go into it? And I love that aspect. I have not seen Shin Ultraman as yet, but I definitely plan to see it. I feel like I'm doing like a DVD Tuesday here, like a throwback. But I have here this Godzilla set. If I can show you this. This is a Blu-ray set of a lot of the classic Toho Godzilla movies, and it's filled with it's filled with all sorts of artwork. And then the I love it. Look at this artwork. This artwork is insane. This is so cool. And it's got Blu-ray versions also with different versions of the Godzilla films. This is mostly the early Toho Godzilla stuff. So what can you say? Now, I had not seen, and I'm kind of surprised I hadn't seen, the Godzilla. It's a Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. I believe that's the Japanese title here. Here we go. How about that? How about that for today? There we are. I think I got this at a convention. Anyways, so I may have seen it, but I saw the dubbed version. Fathom Events yesterday in celebration of Godzilla Day, November 3rd, screened the 2002 Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, and that is the Japanese title. They showed a little preview at the beginning. They're making these short films. I strongly recommend subscribe to the Toho official YouTube channel. They make short films of like monsters fighting monsters. And they showed this kind of battle where Godzilla fights Hedorah, or the smog monster. They have this little battle in the city, and they show like the short, which is like 2 minutes. Then they show like a making of. They go into this warehouse. I wish they would have done just a video of the whole warehouse. They have storage of all the monsters they've used for all the past movies. They keep in storage. It's incredible. Obviously, they're in varying conditions. They've also got like props, like they could literally make a building set within minutes by just pulling out buildings and setting them up. It was great. So they showed this little like 10-minute behind the scenes. And then the president of Toho Pictures came out and introduced the film. This screening was packed, nearly full screening at a 7 p.m. They added an additional screening at 9 p.m. It was all Godzilla nerds. Yes, they exist. And it was fantastic. This version of Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla is much more serious than the original Mechagodzilla movies from the early 70s. So this was more of a serious take. It had layers of humor. but it focuses on, a group of characters that have to deal with Godzilla has come back. Godzilla has been gone since the 1950s. He has somehow returned. How do we defend against Godzilla? They find the bones of the original Godzilla that they killed in the 50s, and using it as sort of an armature, they build around the original bones of Godzilla a mechanized Godzilla with weapons, super weapons, and it can fly, it can do all this stuff, but it's taken very seriously. It's supported by these group of pilots. And this one woman, she was in a tragic accident. They have these sort of laser beam things, and she has an accident. Someone's inadvertently killed. They blame her. It's really not her fault. She blames herself. There's all this, like, all sorts of melodrama. I would describe this incarnation, the 2002 Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, as kind of a melodrama, right? Then you meet this scientist who has a young daughter, who, the daughter like lost her mother tragically, and she has this plant that's like her friend. The young daughter just hangs out, and it's just this really sweet melodrama. Alan, strongly recommend that you see this. And a lot of people.
Let me get this straight. You saw the 2002 version, not the original 1974 version.
That's correct. I saw the 2002
version. I'm completely thinking you saw the original from 74.
No, the original from 74 is kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
This one, they take it way more seriously. Like, they show them building the robot, the science, like how they're using like Godzilla DNA to kind of run it. Like, they've got, like, it can be manually piloted. It's great. And there's like all these like great running threads. Here's the thing, how you judge a good Godzilla movie to me is, are you interested in the characters, the human stories of the characters? If the human story is interesting, it's a good Godzilla movie. If the human story is not interesting, that to me is like, well, then why do I care? Because the point is this, I want to be invested in the human characters. Godzilla is a force of nature. Godzilla is going to Godzilla. Okay. It's just the way it is. But if there's a human story that's like, one of my favorites is this one has been titled many different ways. It's Monster Zero, Godzilla versus the Astro Monster. It's basically Godzilla battling King Ghidorah, where they go to Planet X and they meet like these punk rock. They're dressed like Devo, the denizens of Planet X, who basically trick humans into like, hey, we just want to borrow your monsters to fight King Ghidorah. And then what they do is they mind control all the monsters to take over Earth. You got to see. I'll post a picture later of the but I love that movie because you really are invested in the human story behind it, and it's horrific. People die because of monsters in that movie, and it's horrifying. It's great too. They have these flying saucers, and there's an inventor who invents this like alarm sound, but the alarm sound is like deadly to the residents of Planet X. So it drives them crazy. So if there's a great human story in a Godzilla movie, I'm invested. If it's just Godzilla porn, I mean, I'll watch it, but it won't be a memorable Godzilla movie for me. But yeah, I did see the 2002 version.
Because I'm thinking the original. I'm going, I think we've seen two different movies, and we actually were thinking of two different movies.
Right. Well, this one, it's not as easy to see these Godzilla films these days. They're much. They don't get like a wide release.
Yeah, I mean, there are bootleg sites that have the original Godzillas on them. I assume they're in public domain or something like that.
Well, I'll buy box sets. I have in the past bought some bootlegs. But and recently, because of a friend, Chad, I have to thank you, Pageant of the Masters, got me the War of the Gargantuas on Blu-ray, which I'd been salivating over that for years. So I'm a huge fan of the early Toho from the 60s, the Inoshiro Honda ones, and also the soundtrack, the music. This is the thing that also people underestimate about why Godzilla is so important, so popular, is the music in these films is incredible. The music is absolutely incredible. The scores. This score was not as good, but when they used the classic Godzilla score, I love it. The American-made Godzilla movies, the MonsterVerse, that Warner Brothers, it's fun. Those movies are fine. I don't love them nearly as much as the original Godzilla films. The films produced in Japan by Japanese filmmakers, they're just better. I feel like there's something in the DNA about it. They have more to say. And the American-made ones is sort of a license deal, and it's too digital. It's too
well, and you got to throw
it doesn't-
stars in it. I mean, you got to throw Matthew Broderick into it,
right.
And it just kind of ruins. I mean, you kind of want just normal people now, instead of your Hollywood icons fighting Godzilla.
Right. So let's get to so all I can say is this: strongly recommend this. I hadn't seen it. I don't know. Look, I see when they come out and they're available, I see it. I'll buy it. I'll rent it. I'll whatever. But or I'll buy it like the 2-box sets that I have. But you know,
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
glad
that's
that
just
I got
something
to
about
see it in the theater.
Fathom events. You know, I love Fathom events. I love these one-offs, but they are one-offs. You have one day to see it, and then that's it. And we can only talk about it afterwards.